All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. We like to get into the nitty-gritty here, and today we are talking all about the psychology of selling.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So, you're getting ready for this big sales pitch. I know you are. And you want to know, what's going on in people's heads?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to really make this thing work?
Right.
So we're going to dive into this excerpt from The Psychology of Selling
Okay.
by Elite Sales Training. This is a really interesting piece, and we're going to discover a few things like how to build rapport super quick
Okay.
and how to do it ethically.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't want to be manipulative salespeople,
Right. Right.
but we do want to use these psychological principles ethically
Yep.
to really connect with people.
Yes. So
One of the things that I found really interesting in this excerpt is that
yeah.
it says that the first 4 seconds
Oh, wow.
of an interaction are super important.
Yeah. It's funny because, I think we've all had that experience where you meet someone and instantly you kind of know.
Yes.
Yeah or no.
Yes.
And I think, in sales, that's amplified because you're coming in
Exactly.
and you're asking someone to do something.
Yeah, have you ever felt instantly judged or you just connected with someone?
Oh, yeah. All the time. Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because it goes back to, body language,
Yeah.
And nonverbals. And I think in those first 4 seconds, there's a few key things that are super important.
Okay, what are they?
So, eye contact's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure you're making eye contact. You don't want to be shifty-eyed or looking away or anything like that.
Right.
Also, you want to smile,
Okay.
a genuine smile.
Not a creepy one.
Not a creepy one, right?
Right.
Not like I'm trying to sell you something smile, but hey, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy
Right.
to meet you.
Right.
A firm handshake is important as well.
Okay, yeah.
You don't want to have a dead fish handshake,
Right.
but you also don't want to be crushing their hand.
Right.
Right.
A normal, you would shake anyone's hand.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a nice firm handshake. And then the last thing, and this is something that the excerpt really hammers home, is enthusiasm.
Okay.
You've got to bring the energy.
Okay, so there's that line between I'm super excited to be here and I'm kind of overdoing it.
Exactly. And, that's where I think emotional intelligence comes into play a little bit,
Okay. Yeah, the excerpt mentions that.
You want to kind of mirror the prospect's energy.
So if they're
Yeah, if they're super high energy.
Yeah.
You're not going to come in and be like, "Hey, what's up?"
Right.
You're going to match their energy a little bit, but you're not going to be inauthentic about it.
So how does mirroring actually work?
It's funny because I think a lot of people, when they think about mirroring, they think about mimicking someone's movements. Exactly.
Copying them.
Yeah, but it's not really about that. It's more about, like you said, kind of matching your energy level.
Okay.
So if someone is, speaking really quickly and they're kind of animated,
Yeah.
you don't want to be really slow and monotone. You want to kind of match that pace.
Okay.
But it's also about things their body language.
Okay.
If they're leaning forward, you might lean forward a little bit. If they're, have their arms crossed, you might want to kind of be aware of that and maybe not mirror that.
Oh, interesting.
But it's really about creating that sense of rapport and connection.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of vibing at the same level, then it's easier to get them to buy in.
It just feels more natural, and I think it subconsciously creates that sense of trust.
So how do you do this ethically? How do I make sure that I'm not manipulating someone?
That's a great question, and I think the key is authenticity.
Okay.
It's not about trying to trick someone or manipulate them. Right.
It's about genuinely trying to connect with them
Okay.
and using these techniques as a way to enhance that connection.
So you're saying, if I'm not genuinely interested,
Yeah,
then it's going to come across as fake.
exactly.
Yeah.
And people can spot that a mile away.
Makes sense. And emotional intelligence is a big part of that, right?
Huge. Yeah.
The excerpt talks about
Yeah.
how emotional intelligence can really help you in sales.
Emotional intelligence is all about understanding,
Okay.
not just your own emotions, but also the emotions of the person you're interacting with.
Okay. So that's picking up on cues.
Exactly. It's about being able to read the room,
Okay.
noticing those subtle cues, their facial expressions, their tone of voice, their body language,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to respond to those cues in a way that is empathetic and understanding.
Right.
So, for example, let's say you're giving a pitch,
Yeah.
and you notice that the person you're talking to seems a little hesitant.
Yeah.
Maybe they're frowning a little bit or they have their arms crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just plowing through your presentation,
Right.
you might want to pause and say something like,
Okay.
hey, I'm sensing that you might have some reservations about this.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
That's good.
By acknowledging their emotions, you're showing them that you're paying attention,
Right.
that you care, and that you're not just trying to make a sale.
And that builds trust.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they feel heard.
Yes. And that trust is essential for building a strong relationship,
Yeah.
which is ultimately what's going to lead to a successful sale.
Totally. And that actually reminds me of that story that's in the excerpt about, this salesperson who was, trying to close this big deal. And he realized that his client was like super stressed out
Oh, yeah.
about something totally unrelated.
Right.
And instead of just focusing on the sale,
Yeah.
he took the time to listen to his client.
And offer support. And that act of empathy really strengthened their connection.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And it led to a successful outcome,
Because ultimately people buy from people they like and trust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as our listener is getting ready for their big pitch,
Yes.
what's the big takeaway here?
The big takeaway is those first 4 seconds are crucial.
Yeah.
You've got to nail that first impression. And then from there, it's about building rapport, using techniques like mirroring,
Okay.
but always being authentic.
Yeah.
And tapping into that emotional intelligence to really understand and connect with your prospect.
It's not just about closing the deal.
Exactly.
It's about creating a win-win for both people.
It's about building a relationship.
Totally.
Yeah.
So as you're going into this, big meeting,
Yeah.
I want you to think about how you can use these principles,
Mm-hmm.
not just to sell a product,
Right.
but to build stronger relationships
Yeah.
in all areas of your life.
In your personal life, your professional life,
Exactly.
have a valuable skill.
That's an excellent point to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Best of luck with that pitch.
Good luck.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.